Welcome to Yarnspirations. My name is Brittany and I teach over at B.Hooked Knitting, and I'll be your guide throughout this entire project. We're going to learn how to knit the Mega Throw using Bernat Mega Bulky Yarn and very jumbo-sized knitting needles. If you haven't done so already, you'll want to download the free pattern from yarnspirations.com. You'll want to choose the color of Bernat Mega Bulky Yarn that you're going to use for your project, purchase that yarn, and then watch the video. We're going to work through this project from start to finish, so from the cast on to the cast off. If you are a complete beginner knitter, this is the project for you. So download your free pattern, get your yarn, get your knitting needles, and let's get started. We're going to begin our mega throws by casting on 65 stitches. Now we're going to use the long tail cast on, and as the name implies, we need a very long tail. So we're going to be casting on 65 stitches. I always say it's better to have too much than too little. If you don't leave yourself a long enough tail, then you won't be able to finish casting on the total number of stitches. So what I have here is about 10 yards or so of yarn, and that is just from the skein. So the end is in this pile somewhere here, and this end is coming from the ball of yarn. Once you have your long tail, then we can start on our cast on. Now you have to use just one of your knitting needles, so I usually just leave the other off to the side. We're just going to cast on with one stitch, and with that just looped over, we'll just lay it on top of your knitting needle. Now I'm just going to steady this with my finger, and I'm going to work with these two strands, so the tail coming here, the ball of yarn coming here, and I'm just going to hold on to them with these two fingers down here, and I have my index and my thumb just resting on each side. Now make sure you hold on to the loop that's sitting on top of your needle and then pull it down, but as you do, rotate it around, so you're going to grab that from your thumb and then back around, and you'll grab from your index finger. And then you're just going to release your thumb and slide it onto your needle and then just adjust. So let's do that one more time. It's a little confusing if this is brand new to you. If you're familiar with knitting and you know the long tail cast on, you can just fast forward a little bit. We're just going to cover this in more detail for our beginners here. So we just have our two loops just like that. Bring your knitting needle down and grab that from your thumb, and then grab from your index finger. Now you'll take this loop from your thumb and you're just going to release it over the tip of the needle, and then you'll just slide everything on and then just shift all of this yarn so that it's tight. Now you don't want it too tight because we do have to work into these stitches, but you don't want it loose. You don't want to see any air coming through, because then your stitches will be too loose and your blankets will look kind of funny. So we'll do that one more time, just a little bit faster. We want a total of 65 loops on our needle. So we've just made our fourth one there. And as you place these loops on your needle, then you can shift them down. So the needle here is really designed to capture the gauge. So we are setting our stitches so that they are all the same size because they're all being wrapped around the needle. But as we progress, of course, you can see we have a cord here, and so it's just going to slide down the cord. But the gauge will maintain its shape, so your loops will stay the same size and the same shape, and you can just slide them down as you finish. And this cast on, of course, will take a little bit longer with this jumbo yarn and these gigantic knitting needles. It's a little bit more difficult to work with these, especially if you're used to smaller needles. Now you can see I have a few stitches that are on the cord, and there's no big deal. So what I need for you to do at this point, now that you have a good understanding of the long tail cast on, is finish casting on your stitches, a total of 65. And once you have that, come back to the video and we'll talk about the very simple stitch pattern to this design. Once you have your 65 stitches cast onto your needles, then we're ready to begin with the first row. This design has a very simple 2-row pattern repeat. We're going to be working with knits and purls. And if knitting is something that's brand new to you, you always want to hold your needle in your non-dominant hand on the side where you have stitches to work, and in your dominant hand should be the needle that you're moving your stitches to. So go ahead and orient yourself in that way right now. Now you'll hold your tail. This is what was left from my tail, and I'm just going to leave that there. I will weave it in later. And we're ready to begin our first row. So the first thing that we want to do is insert our needle knitwise. So that is from this side coming out the back. And then just hold it there while you get your yarn from the yarn ball, and you'll just wrap it around that back needle. Then you'll just move it along the bottom and then slide the stitch off. So we'll do that one more time. Insert your needle into the next stitch, wrap your yarn, pull it down, and then you can slide that stitch off. And that's what we're going to do for every one of our stitches. We're going to knit every stitch. So what I need for you to do at this point, now that you have the hang of how to do the knit stitch, go ahead and knit all of the remaining loops that are on your needles. Okay? So get that done and then come back to the video and we'll talk about what to do for our second row in this repeat. So now I have completed the first row where I knit every single stitch, and you can see that it's just stretched out on my circular needles. I mentioned that this design has a 2-row pattern repeat. And what that means is that we're going to repeat the same 2 rows over and over, and that's going to create our design. So the first row is knit every stitch. Now the second row is purl every stitch. So we're going to purl every stitch in row 2. And a purl is exactly the opposite as a knit. So the first thing you want to make sure, again, is that your free needle is in your dominant hand and the needle where you're working the loops off of is in your non-dominant hand. The other thing you want to make sure is that your working yarn is coming towards the front. So before we had it back here when we were doing our knit stitches, now we want to have it in front of us. So you're going to insert your needle from front to back and then steady that there as you take your working yarn. You want to make sure you tighten things up. And then we're just going to wrap it around the needle in that direction. Then you'll slide it down and towards the back, and then you can drop this loop because you've transferred it over to the other needle. And then you'll just repeat that. Purlwise, wrap your yarn, and then slide it out through the back and off. So for this row, we just want to purl every single stitch. Once you've finished your second row, where we purled every stitch, you can start to see a little bit of the pattern. And so we're just going to see all these little V's, and it'll just look like a traditional knitted stitch, or the stockinette stitch. So that covers our entire pattern repeat for this throw. It's really, really easy. Even a complete beginner can make this blanket. So all we need to do from here is now start all over. So we did a row of knit and a row of purl. So now our third row is going to be a row of knits. And one thing to keep in mind if you're concerned about your end stitches. So once you make your last stitch, it always looks really loose like this. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Once you work your first stitch, so we're working in knits, so we want to make sure we have our working yarn coming from the back. And then just insert your needle into that stitch, and it is very loose, you can see. So what I do is just make sure I pull on the working yarn just to tighten it up as I'm wrapping it around that back needle and then working the stitch. And even though it looks really loose and really sloppy at the very beginning and the end of the rows, as you add to it, it will start to improve, and it'll tighten up, and you'll actually have a neater edge than probably what you would expect by looking at it at the end of each row. So in order to finish our throws, all we have to do is repeat our rows of knits and purls. So knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row. And we're going to do that for a total of 72 rows. And you can just count them by counting the V's in your design. So this is row 1, row 2, and row 3. And so you can just keep track of it that way. Once you have a total of 72 rows, then you want to come back to the video and we'll talk about how to bind off and of course how to weave in our ends. And that's really all there is to it. This is a super easy project with a very simple stitch pattern, but it will of course take some time to completely knit it. So that's what I need for you to do now. Finish your knit row, then follow with a purl row and a knit row and a purl row, and repeat that until you have finished a total of 72 rows. So once you have knit up to row 72, which is where I finished off, row 72 should be a purl row. All of our even number rows should be purls, and that's going to set us up so that we can do our cast off. Now we always want to cast off, at least for this particular pattern, on the right side of the work. So the part of our blanket that looks like this. So we're just going to do a very simple beginner-friendly cast-off method for this design. Now we're going to be working in knit stitches. And the first thing that we need to do is knit the first stitch. Then we'll go ahead and knit the second stitch. Now we're going to take this first loop and pass it over the tip of the needle. So we don't want to drop this one here. Just use your opposite needle to work that up and over, just like that. Now we'll knit the next stitch. And then we'll do that same thing. We'll take this loop here and we'll pass it over the tip of the needle. And this is what our casting off edge is going to look like. It's just going to finish, and it should look very similar to our cast on, where we use the long tail cast on. And that's our repeat. We're just going to knit the next stitch, grab that back loop and pull it over the tip of the needle. Knit the next stitch, pass over that back loop. And that's how we're finishing off the edge, each one of the stitches, so that way it doesn't come unraveled or anything like that. And so we're just going to progress all the way to the end of our row, knitting one stitch, then passing that back loop over. And that's what I need you to do for now. Go ahead and finish your cast off edge. So I've made it to my last two stitches, and I'm just going to show you how to finish things off. So I'm just working this in the same way. So knit one and then pull that back loop over. And now I will knit my last stitch. And then remove that back loop and pull it just over the tip. And then you're just left with that one loop on your needle. And what I like to do is just remove my needle, hold on to this, don't let it go. And I've actually made it to just the very end of my ball of yarn. So I'm just going to work that tail through the loop and pull that tight, and that's going to secure it. Now all that's left to do is weave in the ends from where you had to join on a new ball of yarn, and of course weave in the ends from each of the corners. So let's just quickly have a look at how you would weave in your ends. So what I have here is just one of my joins at the back side of the work, so this is the wrong side, And you're going to want to take the largest darning needle you have, now what I like to do when I'm weaving in my ends is just work along a dense part of the work. So I'm going to find where there's a nice solid row of stitches, and I'm just going to conceal it within those stitches. So I might just run over to this next stitch here and pull it through, and then find the next loop here and work it under. So I'm kind of doing like a little zigzag. Now once you go up in one direction a few stitches, it's always a good idea to maybe go back in the other direction. And you'll see I'm not trying to be really careful about how I'm weaving it in. I'm going through the yarn rather than going under it, and that's going to help it stay secure. So once you're pretty sure that your end is secure, and you can just simply trim it off and then just move on to the next one. And that's all there is left to do at this point, is just weave in all of your ends and of course enjoy your brand new blanket. Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout this entire tutorial. It's been a real honor to be able to teach you how to knit this amazing mega throw. It's been one of my favorite projects, and I hope you really enjoyed it too. And I just want to thank Yarnspirations once again for the amazing opportunity to be able to teach you how to do this pattern. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial and you really like my teaching style, you might like some of the other tutorials I have available at BHookedCrochet.com if you're into crochet, or knitting.BHookedCrochet.com. I have several different video tutorials, all free patterns, really great resources. If you want to check it out, head over to BHookedCrochet.com. You'll find everything I have to offer. Thank you so much.